All right, cool. Well, best laid plans. I was telling Kurt and Harmony just before we let everybody in that I had this grand plan of sharing images from the 2019 trip to Edradour, Signatory Edradour that Evan and I did. And then Walter found some dogs at the park he was quite fond of late this afternoon, and I could not separate him from said dogs. And barely got dinner done. So I've found the photos. They're not sorted in any way, and there's a ton of them. So I'm probably not going to share all of them, but I will pull up a couple because it's a beautiful distillery. And if you're in Scotland, it's very close to Glasgow and Edinburgh, roughly an hour and a bit drive. It's well worth a visit. It kind of looks like if the Smurfs were going to open a distillery in a tiny valley in the mountains, that's what it would look like. Beautiful whitewashed buildings. Probably should just tell you this. I could probably show you a photo. If this pops up here, we'll just see. My computer seems to be overtaxed trying to find this photo, which is a little worrying. But while I'm waiting for that to load, hopefully it'll load. Let's see. Oh, there we go. This is Evan and I in 2019 out in front of the main distillery building at Edradour. With Andrew Symington, who's standing next to me, who's the owner, although only 50% owner now because he's sold a portion of the business to his German importers. And then Des, who has retired from the business, but he was Andrew's right-hand man. And anyone who knows anything about Andrew Symington knows Andrew didn't so much like the business of owning and running a distillery. I'm not sure why that's popping up. Andrew liked playing at owning a distillery, by which I mean running a forklift, moving barrels, running the stills, emptying the washback, which at Edradour has to be done by hand. It's a tiny 1 ton open mash tun that is like over 100 years old, and the only way to empty it is with a small wooden shovel. And he would do that because that's the kind of guy he is. Quite a character. I've seen him there several times. He's almost killed me with his forklift barrel moving machine. But it's one of the charms of the place. Like, how many places do you go into where like the owner is willing to get his hands dirty and roll up his sleeves? It's pretty awesome. Anyway, before we get rolling on the main show, because we are still waiting on a handful of stragglers, as we do always, we'll just highlight a couple things, including we have a sale coming up this weekend, and we're kicking it off with our wine festival. There's still a few tickets available for that. Going to be some great wines open. The sale is going to run Friday through Monday. There'll be details on that in our various newsletters and whatnot over the coming days. But you definitely want to check that out. And then we've been beating this almost like a dead horse, Kurt. But we have a tasting coming up on Tuesday that we're really excited about, by which I mean next Tuesday. And it's this flagship versus distillers edition tasting where we're going to take 4 whiskeys, 2 each from 4 distilleries and 2 whiskeys from each, Cragganmore, Lagavulin, Oban, and Talisker. And we're going to pit their main bottling versus the distillers edition to see how they stack up. I think it's going to be an awesome tasting.
That's level stuff. That lit me up so much when we were talking about doing that tasting. At least 2 of these distilleries are 2 of my favorites, and Oban, if they released more whiskey, is almost always bloody good.
And something
challenging old school whiskeys that I really, really love. It's gonna be a banger of a tasting.
Yeah, and if they could only bottle something that wasn't at 43%, like that would be amazing. In store, we've got John Campbell towards the end of this month, the distillery manager at Lochley. Famously, before that, he was the long-suffering distillery manager at Lefroy. So we're excited to have him come to store, and there's some new Lochley bottlings. That's sold out, so I won't trouble you with it. But SMWS, there's some spots available for the June virtual outturn tasting. And what else have we got? Ardbeg Day, which I think there's 5 spots left for the morning masterclass on Ardbeg Day. So regardless, lots of stuff on the site. I'm not going to show them all. You guys know where to find them. Lots of fun events coming up, and there should be some other new ones loaded next week. I can say there's going to be a new Compass Box tasting because we've got the new Flaming Heart coming, as well as a couple of other releases that we will mention later. What else is in that list? I know there's an old malt cask first editions tasting coming up in August, but that's a ways off. There are some other cool things coming up too. And possibly what is it, a Renegade rum tasting, but I've still got to confirm details on that. So fun stuff coming down the pipes in the weeks ahead. But that's not where we're here tonight. We're here to, hey.
Yeah. Harmony and I were talking earlier, and I sent you a note. We want to start drumming up some attention for something that was super cool to both of us here. We just got the bottle shot of our Tromba tequila that's coming in, and it looks ridiculously cool. Tequila was awesome, and that's coming from somebody who wasn't a tequila guy. So I think this one's going to move fast. The price is really, really ridiculous, and the tequila is actually really good. So you guys got to be aware when that comes out, it's probably going to disappear in a real hurry.
Well, I like the sound of that. All right, let's take it back to Edradour Distillery here. And we've got some whiskeys to get into, so we don't want to keep them from you too long. But while we're getting that first whiskey, the Edradour 10 teed up, here's another little shot of the distillery, all bucolic looking, surrounded by farmland, whitewashed buildings, red trim, slate roofs. You got to love it. One quick little nugget about Edradour that I love is the name of the distillery translates to, in Scots Gaelic, the place where waters meet. And this is sort of eerily apropos because Andrew Symington, who bought the distillery in 2002, he already owned the Signatory independent bottling firm. When he bought it, within a month of buying the distillery, the region had something like 2 months worth of rain in less than 24 hours, and the distillery was nearly washed away and flooded. Serious damage. Obviously, it makes sense that the name comes from somewhere, the place where waters meet, that's probably flooded many times over the eons. But thankfully, his insurance policy had kicked in just days before the flood hit, and he was actually covered. Otherwise, he could have been ruined at that one early stage in the game. The distillery itself, Edradour, dates to 1825 and was not referred to as Edradour until 1837. Prior to that, it had another silly name, which I just lost because the page closed on my book, Glenforris. The distillery today produces a fairly traditional style whiskey, long fermentation, slow distillations. They also have a very unusual piece of kit that I want to show you, which I almost certainly have a photo of. And it's a piece of equipment borrowed from a dairy that is used to cool the water before it goes into, that's actually their warm tubs. It's used to cool it's used to cool the water that comes out of the mash tun before it goes into the washbacks so that it doesn't potentially slow the fermentation process. And we'll find that photo here somewhere. But while we're doing that, why don't we get our noses and our palates wet with the Edradour 10-year. This is a whiskey that when it first hit Canada about 12, 13 years ago, I was not overly wowed by it. But as with a lot of what's been coming out of Signatory, I think the quality and the caliber of their whiskey has been steadily increasing over the last 12 to 15 years. And it was really kicked off by improvements in the cask management at the distillery, buying better quality sherry casks. A lot of the stock they inherited from Pernod Ricard when they bought the distillery in 2002 was in tired old casks. But over the last 12 to 15 years, especially, the quality of the spirit coming out of there has generally been improving. So, Kurt and Harmony, one of you guys want to take a stab at sharing your thoughts on the Edradour 10 while I pull up the bottle shot from our site?
It's a little figgy and soupy for me, actually. There's a bit of a floral note in there too. There's a little bit of hidden citrus. It's kind of like boozy nuts too, like kind of walnutty or something in there.
Yeah, soupy is a nicer word. than I was originally vibing. But yeah, lots of dark fruits in there. And I agree with the nutty notes, like maybe like walnuts or almonds underneath that. It smells like it's going to be heavy and thick.
Well, one of the things that I would note about the Edradour 10 is 10, 12 years ago when this first came out, it was a lot more refill cask and bourbon cask. It was a lot paler in color, but also the aromas, the tastes that were coming from it were a lot lighter. It was very grainy. I would almost say even a touch towards the barnyard side of things back then. But now you are starting to get more of that treacle, molasses, candied fruit, chocolate starting to develop. And while it is a little bit soupy, it's got like a bit of like a tomato soup thing there. For 40%, I actually don't mind the nose. I think this has actually got some character for such a weak ABV.
Did you see Sky Andrew's name on there? My chat is minimized right now. I can't see anything. If Sky's on there, he sent me a jar of Big Jam at one point when I said I'd never tried it before. And there's absolutely a note of that all over the top of this too.
I do not see a Sky Andrews tonight.
Sky, you did me proud, buddy. You gave me a new tasting note. Thanks for that.
I'm getting like cinnamons and raisins and just like a lot of that in here.
Yeah, the palates, you know, I think doesn't quite live up to the nose. It's sort of flat and there's flavor there, but it's not exciting. It doesn't really have much of a body. I think where it's suffering from there is it's been diluted and it's been filtered out. Like for those who don't know, when you bottle below 46%, you generally need to go through a process called chill filtration. The only footnote I'd add to that is Gordon MacPhail, when they bottle at 43, they do chill filter, but it's a very light chill filtration, whereas most of the industry, when they chill filter, they, for lack of a better term, chill filter the shit out of the whiskey because they don't want it to go cloudy. They don't want flocculation to happen if it gets cold and the water and oil start to pull apart. So that's one of the things that you have to do with these lower ABV bottlings, and it's purely cosmetic. But whether the whiskey tastes better with or without, there's been a long-standing debate over this. You're taking something away from it, and I think in this case you're losing a bit of the texture, the mouthfeel, which for me is part of the experience.
I would agree. Just off the nose on this, I was expecting more of like a fullness on the palate. That's not there. It's not bad, but yeah, Shlomo, exactly. It's not your typical Edradour syrup.
I
Yeah,
like that you said they've taken something away from it too, Andrew, because you can attest when you've been in a warehouse or something and you pull from the barrel, as natural as you can get it, it's just a completely different experience. And those are going to be the most unforgettable whiskeys you'll ever try. When they do something like this, they've taken a big chunk of what you're getting out of that natural product away, I think. And that's all those oils. That's that big, rich, unctuous mouthfeel, right? I think it lacks a little bit. It's fortunate it's a heavy whiskey. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, and we've got something a little bit more sherried and slightly higher ABV move into. Actually, you shouldn't say slightly higher. It's respectfully higher, up to 46. But before we share the Caledonia, I'm going to share just another little photo here of Edradour, because as I said, it is a very beautiful little distillery. Interestingly, Edradour was actually the most visited distillery in Scotland until about 10 years ago. Part of this is because it's in this beautiful little town called Pitlochry, and it's only 10 minutes up the road, up into the hills, although it is a bit of a drive to get up there. And they were offering free tours to people who came because for a basic tour, they wanted to get them to come in and buy a bottle of their 10-year-old and take it home with them, tell people about Edradour. But they realized after a while that they weren't selling enough bottles to justify the expense of doing these tours. So they stopped doing the free tours. So they are no longer the most visited annual distillery in all of Scotland. Curiously, I don't know if I remember this, but I think Arran now claims to be the most visited distillery in Scotland, which is amazing because it's another great little distillery. But yeah, for a time it was actually Edradour. So let's pull it up here. This is the next whiskey number 2, the Caledonia. This whiskey here is bottled 46%. At one point it was both, I believe, both bourbon and sherry, but it's the last time we checked into it, it's at least 4 years in Oloroso sherry cask, bottled 46%, no color edit, no chill filtering. And it's a celebration of a Scottish folk song by Dougie MacLean, sort of celebrating Scottish nationalism. And if you buy a bottle, Dougie MacLean's face and story is on the back of the bottle. But Kurt and Harmony, what do we think of this one?
Oh, it's so much bigger.
What's that, Kurt?
Shame on us for that spelling mistake. Edradour was spelled wrong on that slide or
Was
on
it
our
really?
website. Yeah.
That's not a slide. That's
Yeah, I corrected myself. Yeah, our site. I'll have to fix that tomorrow. Shameful. Sorry, Harmony. Go ahead.
Oh, good. I was saying the palate lives up to the nose on this one, and the nose is bigger and fuller and offering so much more than the last one. You just want to chew it without even smelling it, and then when you taste it, you almost want to chew through that palate. There's so much going on. It's so pretty.
Yeah, Kurt, before I bug you about your tasting notes, sorry, where was it misspelled?
It's not in the title. It's like one of the last lines in the description.
Oh, okay.
It's missing the D. It's Edradour.
That could be in,
Or
is it Edradour? That could be another Aberdelphi.
I was just thinking every hour is Edradour, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Kurt, what are your thoughts on the palate on this one, or the nose and taste?
Yeah, I like it. I think there's a little bit more balance on this one, a little bit more into like hot cross buns and stuff, a little bit less on the spice heavy that the first one seemed to be. And I think it's going to be a recurring something to pick up on as we're going through these. The worm tubs are huge. This is a big, meaty kind of spirit. Like it carries a lot of weight. It's in that kind of soupy sort of style even before it hits barrels. And Andrew Symington, we'll probably talk a fair bit about his views on wood and stuff, but he tends to really go for these big, deep, sherry kind of casks and stuff like that. Throw those two together and everything comes out really heavy. I like it. It's a traditional kind of old school whiskey you don't see enough of nowadays.
Mm-hmm. So there is both Andrew and his forklift and some casks. Just thought it might be fun to put that in there if you didn't believe me that he prefers to drive around his place doing work than visit solid retailers. His first retailer in Canada, as a matter of fact. Yeah, he'll come shake your hand, but then he wants to get back to work. So that's just how he rolls. Yeah, this is such a step up from the 10-year. I mean, they're like two completely different whiskeys. The 10-year is sort of flabby and uninteresting. This has got some structure to it. It's got some richness to it. And I think, as you said, Kurt, it's a signal of, some of what we're going to see moving through some of these other expressions tonight.
But even that 10, Andrew, you and I had a friend a few years back who that was his most detested whiskey. He called it like virtually undrinkable. It was a running joke between us. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a good 10-year-old. So they've come miles and miles and miles from where they were about a decade ago. It's
vastly improved from where it was.
And then the 12, prettier. It's just prettier. It's balanced.
Mm-hmm. All right. Might as well show another photo here, as long as this thing doesn't move on me. I'm glad I actually found some of these. So this is the old visitor center and shop. It's now some offices. And up here, this is the old malting floor and kiln, which they now use for like larger tastings, larger group tastings, sort of a bit of like almost a small conference center. Edradour was the smallest distillery in Scotland until Avon Jarek opened on the Isle of Lewis, which was literally a guy who took some drum shaped pieces of copper and started making whiskey in them. When that happened, I think they stopped. They realized there wasn't really any value in continuing to be the smallest distillery in Scotland. You had the Thompson brothers open their distillery in Dornoch and a few others. So they decided they were going to try to increase production, but it was very difficult to increase production in their main distillery, and they didn't want to lose the aesthetic of it or change anything about it because it's a historic building at this stage. So what they've actually done, and it's very clever, is as you follow this burn up into the valley, they've not only built enormous amounts of warehousing back into the valley. You can't see them anywhere, like they're hidden in the landscape, but they've also hidden a second production center, which to my knowledge can produce twice as much as the main distillery site. And everything in there is an exact replica of what's in the main distillery, except that the mash tun is automated, so they don't have to shovel it out by hand. And they've simplified a few of the steps so that they can actually run that smaller site 24/7 if necessary. I don't think they do, but they have that flexibility. It was all about how do they grow the brand without changing the style of whiskey and also respecting kind of the beauty and the heritage of the site, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The photos of the distillery are really cool. It looks like they're almost like 4 small houses that have been like built upon as it's grown.
Well, Harmony, I'm glad you pointed that out because it takes it back to what distilleries like Edradour were all about. Is these were small farm distilleries, and if you go back 150, 200 years, most of the distilleries in Scotland would have started out as a farm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the curious things about cattle rearing, which the Scots have always done a lot of, is cattle can't eat raw barley. And barley is a grain that grows better in Scotland's climate than many other types do. So in order to use it as a feedstock, you actually need to take out some of the starches first. And so converting the barley into whiskey and or beer before you feed it to the cattle actually makes it so the cows can digest it. It increases the level of protein. Also, there's a waste byproduct, which is that leftover grain that the cows are eating. So what happened is a lot of these places would have been growing barley, feeding it to their cattle, but then they realized over time there was a lot more money to be made making whiskey than rearing and animal husbandry, essentially. And a lot of these distilleries, I mean it's the same with Ardbeg and Lefroy, both of them would have started out making whiskey as a way of taking barley and making it so that their cattle could eat it. Most distilleries, if you're talking pre-1880s, would have been a farm that happened to be making whiskey that decided to become a distillery because that was the more profitable route to take. And Edradour is no exception to that. And when we get to their peated version, the Ballechin, a little later, we'll talk about that distillery as well, because the Ballechin was actually the name of another farm distillery. So here, I'm going to show just a couple of quick slides that are in the distillery, and then we're going to move on to the one whiskey in tonight's lineup that's a little different than all the others. So this is their open top cast iron mash tun at Edradour. It's actually in a cleaning cycle when we were there, so there's no barley in there, just hot water. If it looks small in the photo, good, because it is small. That's somebody's hand there. It gives you a sense of scale. If you go to Macallan, their mash tun is like 50 times this size. True story. Sorry, David Nair just joined us. So welcome, David. Just a quick heads up. We have tried whiskeys 1 and 2, which are the 10-year-old and the 12-year-old. And we're just showing a few photos. There's some shots in there. You can see the spirit safe. Because it's an old distillery, Edradour's not laid out in a way that would make it easy to show the distillery to visitors. There you can see the underside of 2 of the washbacks, Oregon pine. There's the tops of them there. So when you wander around it, it doesn't shoot in the most logical order. This is what I was hoping to show you before. This is a piece of dairy equipment. I believe it's called a Morton cooler. and it's used in the process for pasteurization of milk, if I'm remembering correctly. Edradour, I believe, is the only distillery in Scotland that still has or uses one of these. There was one other that I think did until recently, but I believe they are the last one now. They're the small stills there. Edradour stills were the smallest legally allowed in Scotland until about a dozen years ago. And I know it's spirit still, which is this little one down here. You can tell the difference because the wash still has the watch glass on it. The spirit still was sized so that you couldn't transport it easily with a horse. That was the logic, was if we're going to make it hard for people to smuggle stills around, we'll make the smallest size allowable too big for a horse to drag around. I think that was part of the rough logic. So there's the stills. I think that was a spirits receiver, or nope, that's inside a mash tun, or a washback rather. That's fermentation. There's this the wash still again. You can see another watch glass crammed into a tiny old farm building. This is their mill. They did used to have a very old traditional mill, but it broke beyond the point of repair. So they replaced it with a modern mill. So that's the mill there. And we were talking before about worm tubs. These are surely the smallest worm tubs in Scotland. This is a small distillery. These are tiny. But everything about Edradour is small and kind of cute. That is sort of its nature there. And the idea behind the worm tubs, this is when your spirit comes off the still. In order to condense the vapors back into liquid, you do it through a series of cooled copper pipes. The most common, the most efficient method is a shell and tube condenser. The oldest and most traditional one is a worm tub. And as Kurt was alluding before, worm tubs give you a bit of a meatier, more sulfury style of spirit. So we'll maybe stop the slides there and get on to the next whiskey. Shall we? And I'll see if I can pull up some info on this one, because I don't, do we still have this?
Yes, we have a few bottles left. It's
Oh,
pretty
so
cool. It's a combination of 7 ex-bourbon casks blended together and bottled at cask strength. This
Tell
one's
me more.
58.9. Yeah.
It's, I mean, even for bourbon cask, it's quite pale in color in
It
the
is.
glass.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. It's right there. 7 casks.
It's sort of, it's not quite honeyed. It's more like honeysuckle or something. Like it's a very faint honeyed sweetness on the nose. I will say that I don't find it rough or sharp at 58.9%, especially given that it's only roughly 10 years of age.
Yeah, I get like honey and vanilla and apples for sure. Yeah, that big apple note.
Oh, I think the palate steps up quite a bit. The nose was very shy. I was not getting a lot off it, a little bit of fruit. The palate, honey, like you said, Harmony, loads of apple, pear, lots of white fruit. There's a little bit of a fattiness to it too, like an oily fattiness. Maybe that's your bacon note coming through. So it still has that little faint bit of a meatiness there, and some nice sort of soft barley tones. Kurt, you getting anything in that you want to
add? Yeah, but I am sick, so take my tasting notes with a grain of salt. I just typed down a bunch of notes while I was first nosing it because it was such a departure. I said it's malty. Get notes of Sauvignon Blanc and Brie, and honeysuckle and lemon meringue, orange, or like orange zest, and a little bit of like Brunt's candy on there for me. And that's kind of between the nose and the palate.
Yeah. The finish is quite drying. It's like it almost goes into that like oaky transitioning into like leather territory very subtly.
But you know what's refreshing to me about this one is with the new school of Edradour, with that kind of big bold sherry that we see in so many of the either Edradour or Signatory expressions from Andrew Simonton. Texturally, those are gritty. They feel gritty to me. They feel like you've got a little bit of like dry cocoa in your mouth. Try it as we go through all of these sherry ones. This one doesn't have that. It's a little bit softer on the palate texturally. I like that a lot.
White fruits, citrus. starting to go into some nice melon tones too. Like it is quite a soft, fruity spirit without the sherry there. You know, I'd love to see like refill bourbon cask Edradour at 20, 25 years of age.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
I think it would be gorgeous.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty. Phil did note another typo in the description, 58.2. I believe I can fix that at some point here from home. Whereas the other one might take a bit more time, but yeah, well, let me see what I can do about that. Yeah, did anyone dare add water to this? I mean, it's so easy drinking, it doesn't need any, in my opinion.
Jim's giving thumbs up. It goes well with water, he's saying.
All
Yeah.
right. Jim, if
Just
it
a tiny
doesn't work out, I'm gonna hold you accountable for this. Just saying.
I'll probably play with water on the second pass, but for now,
Yeah.
I had an
Really
epiphany.
enjoying it without.
Andrew, I know you and I are kind of similar with water and whiskey. And I kind of gave myself a general rule where it was like, if it's younger than 10 and over 60%, maybe a couple drops are okay, kind of thing.
Mhm.
At this point in my life, I'm kind of like, if I don't think the whiskey is not really good, I'm going to leave it alone. Like if I think it's not working, I'll try diluting it a little bit to see if it's better. Otherwise, I don't add water at this point. It just seems nonsense to me. If it's good, why mess with it?
All right. I'm just previewing some other photos here to see if I can what's worth sharing. People want, I can show the new production side too, maybe after the next whiskey. I can also share some photos from the inside of the of their warehouse, which having just quickly reviewed the photos, they've got some pretty crazy stuff within easy arm's reach.
some comments coming in on the chat. It's better with water.
Mauro says better with water. Jen. I'm going to dissent. I think I still like it. I like it au naturel.
Don't do water.
I mean, water doesn't kill it. I liked how expressive and fruity it was on the palate on my own. So
yeah,
Mauro's a fool. I love it. Shlomo. Dropping it hard there on friends. Well, what's next here? We've got, this is the one that was like the hot ticket for the longest time. The Edradour 10-year-old heavily sherried, which for a long time was actually exclusive to our shop. I tried several times to get a full cask of this, like be able to bottle our own, but it never amounted to anything. But this is the one we're talking about, 46%. The whole reason this came to Canada, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Alan. These heavily sherried 10-year-old Signatory Edradours were really popular in Asia. And Alan would bump into guys in both Taiwan and Tokyo who'd be like, dude, you got to get the Edradour 10-year heavy sherried. And it took a little bit of begging and pleading. And then finally we did get some into the market. And for, I would say, a good run of about 2 years, we had it all to ourselves. It was all exclusive. Bottled 46%, no added coloring, no non-chill filtered, always from a single first fill Oloroso sherry butt. The current one that we have was bottled in November of 2022, still June 2012. And I don't remember, have I tried this one? Yeah, I did try this one. I got a tasting note down there. But anyway, let's taste it afresh. Harmony, maybe we'll start with you because Kurt's been affected by his kryptonite tonight, I'm guessing. So
I mean, the nose reminds me a bit of like the first sherry that we have, but it is slightly fuller. It's not quite as lush as the Caledonia, in my opinion, but I get a little bit more mint on here than the first one.
Yeah, it's more chocolate leather tones to me, maybe a bit more tobacco than I was getting off the first one. But yeah, I agree. It's there are some similarities to that sort of soupy beef brothy note in the first one. Kurt?
Yeah, sunripe fruit bars to me too. Lots of that going on there. I like that you're kind of getting a little bit more into that kind of sour, almost tropical kind of note going on behind it too, which is really cool.
My
I can't lie, this series has been kind of hit or miss for me. I think this is maybe the best one I've had. I get a bit of, you said chocolate, Andrew. I get a bit of like Count Chocula cereal.
That's a great note.
I'm just looking at my original tasting note on this. I've got Black Forest cake, stewed prunes, teriyaki beef jerky, and maple syrup on blueberry heavy pancakes with a side of chewy bacon, where there's also a spelling mistake I've just noticed. So
Well, you're drinking while you're writing these, I assume, so they're bound to happen.
I generally am. Drinking. I'm not of the who shall not be named school of tasting notes where you have to spit it out and you're not allowed to swallow it. But
Wait, you mean he's sober when he publishes that rubbish?
but he who shall not be named needs not be spoken of. So the less oxygen given, the better. But yeah, even on the palate, I love that. It reminds me I don't do it quite as often without the kids at home anymore, but my Sunday morning ritual was the whole wheat blueberry pancakes, homemade from scratch, like thick sliced harvest cut bacon and maple syrup. And it just reminds me of that.
Awesome. I have another reason to drink scotch in the morning. It'll pair with my pancakes and my bacon. Yeah.
Voldemort. Love it. Yeah, the palate on this, there's some nice sherry tones, there's some nice like dark fruits, raisins, dates, figs, chocolate, spices. Classic sherry notes. I think the fact that it's at 46%, it makes it sort of a sessionable whiskey. Like if this was at cask strength, it would probably be a one and done dram. But at 46%, it's a good drinking strength for this. And I still think, the price has gone up. I think when we first had this, it was like $100 or $105. It's gone up a little bit in price, but in this case, a nice sherry cask worth of Edradour, it's a pretty good buy for that kind of caliber of sherry.
They were too chocolatey for me for a while. This one's really good. This is definitely the best one I've had.
It was really dry at first for me, like it's like that dry, bitter chocolate note, but the more it sits and the more you sip it, it definitely brings in those fruit notes.
It is still tannic though. I'm with you. Like,
oh yeah.
Besides my cheeks are puckered right up.
Yeah. And it's even like the front of my lips and stuff. Like,
yeah. If you got a little sip, it's probably not going to do it. If you take a decent sized sip, like it's Sahara in my mouth right now.
Well, I can definitely feel it drying my mouth out. All right. New distillery, you can see they have 4 washbacks instead of 2. So already right there, way more capacity. Here, I got to hide this so that I can scroll through some photos. What else we got here? The new mash tun. So I sort of lied in that it is still open and very traditional. It's cast iron, but the difference is this one can be emptied automatically rather than manually, which is, I'm sure, quite nice. Also, the fact that it's in a large building means they don't have to build all their equipment around an 18 or like a 200+ year old farmstead. There's the stills. You get a better sense of the two of them side by side. It's actually impossible to take this photo in the original distillery because it's just so tight quarters and so cramped. But they are still on the average, these would be amongst the smallest stills still operating in Scotland. There's the or the worm tub rather, the outdoor worm tub. Again, still small. You can see they're not trying to make it look like a 200-year-old building here, but they are trying to be true to all the equipment, the way that it was set up in the old distillery, including the Morton cooler. They have a Morton cooler in the new one. You can see the mechanism in here. Like one of the things that I will say is kind of impressive that they did is installing an old school mash tun like this in a new distillery. Like they were essentially having somebody make for them 19th century distilling equipment. Like nobody makes these anymore like this. Like they would have had to pay somebody to make something as old school and traditional as that. People will make parts to fix old ones these days, but they won't make new ones. And there you go. Same mill, again, different setup. And what else have we got here? These are some casks we were looking at the warehouse. In fact, this is probably that Kleinlich cask that we had about 2 years ago, that Evan and I would have been sampling there. So I'm going to stop the share there. I do have some other photos I will share in a bit. But in the interim, let's move on to the straight from the cask Edradour. And I'll see if I can pull that one up. Hopefully the alcohol's right, 58.6. So this is the guy here. Thoughts on Edradour moving away from those tiny little colored wooden boxes, Kurt and Harmony?
Dear God. Harmony, you
Thank
take this
you.
one because it'll make my head explode.
Oh man, those little boxes, like they're cute, but like they just take up so much space, and what a wasteful cost to have at a distillery.
And they dried out, and then the
they
lids
dried
wouldn't
out.
fit on them.
Yeah. And then
And
the
they-
bottles don't fit in the boxes.
Absolutely bananas.
The only thing I liked was like the different colors,
Mhm.
because they were cute. Like who doesn't like cute little things? But they can make the tubes different colors if they wanted to.
Mhm.
Yeah, this
Agreed.
seems like way fruitier and brighter on the nose to me than
I
the
would-
last one.
I was gonna say this one to me seems more mortlacky. It's kind of
Meatier.
meaty, faintly sulfury, sherry. Like this is what Mortlack is going for. Like this.
I think I'm falling
Reminds
into
me-
Jeff Surja comment. Doesn't the whiskey just taste better the more you drink?
If I were to blindly guess at what this was, I'd be like, is that a Gordon MacPhail Mortlack?
Hmm.
Like the 15, but obviously the alcohol is too high for the G&M Mortlack 15, but that's where I'm going with this. This reminds me of Gordon MacPhail casks of Mortlack 15, but at a higher proof.
Oh, and it tastes very meaty too, like chewy, meaty. There's your beef jerky note all over.
Mm-hmm. Oh, super beefy. Lots of beef bouillon. Maybe some beef bourguignon boiling away or whatever. I don't know how you make beef bourguignon. I've never made. I'm assuming you boil it in a pot. Someone
How
will
do you-
correct me on this.
How do you get that beef bouillon note in a sherry cask whiskey like this? But it's there.
It's like Kurt was saying before, it's the worm tubs. It's that
Yeah.
reducing copper contact. Like the worm tubs, my understanding is they cool the spirits so quickly, they reduce the copper contact, and then you leave behind a bit more iron and sulfur than you otherwise would have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Kurt, does that jive with your?
Sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen says she's getting a little bit of balsamic vinegar.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
There's tons of balsamic on the palate on this.
Yeah.
But like a balsamic reduction, not like the vinegar, like a balsamic reduction.
Brisket, Shlomo says.
Yeah, I would blind that as Mortlack too. I
Yeah.
don't know if it'd be as specific as G&M, but yes, you're probably more accurate with G&M, but it's definitely Mortlacky. But I'm still with Harmony, her first comment. If you compare it with the last one, it's way fruitier. The last
Yeah.
one's way more chocolate, like cocoa powder kind of thing going on with it. This one's got deeper fruit tones with it.
Right? Totally on the
Yeah.
nose.
Yeah, it's like way like, cherries and just I don't know, like stewed raspberry notes.
Like a
Yeah.
cherry beef pie.
Cherry pie.
The last one, the Signatory Edradour, going back to that on the nose now, it reminds me of like opening up a brand new bag of potting soil,
Interesting.
like a
So-
moist, brand new bag of potting soil.
Andrew, I need your opinion on this one. Edradour, owned by Andrew Symington. Signatory, owned by Andrew Symington. What happens when we have a Signatory Edradour? Is that an OB or an IB?
I mean, Yeah, it's an OB, but it's an OB gussied up as an IB. And, but think about it this way, think about it from the business perspective. Maybe this was a way for Andrew to either get his Signatory customers in some markets interested in Edradour, or his Edradour customers in a market interested in Signatory. And I think it could have been quite a clever ploy in some ways, because I would imagine that in places like Taiwan, the sherried Signatory casks that he was putting out there were what everybody was after. But what's his most profitable product going to be? It's going to be the one he distilled and then bottled. And I could see it as being a way for him to be like, here, you guys are really making a mistake not paying attention to Edradour. Try this Signatory Edradour bottling we did. And it's kind of like a backdoor to get them interested into the brand. That's my theory on it. I never asked him about it.
I'm trying to wrap my head around Jeff's comment here, but
I agree with Jeff a little bit.
am I missing something here? In both cases, you've got somebody who came in later and bought a distillery that existed long before they were there, and they were independent bottlers when they did so. Andrew Symington and G&M bought Ben Romick and started it in bought it in 93, flowed in 98.
Yeah.
They were a bottler first too, right?
Yeah. But
Isn't it? Unless I'm missing something there.
But Gordon MacPhail won't bottle Ben Romick, because that's just the way they operate. Like they might have prior to Ben Romick's new distillery product flowing through, like the traditional, that first release that came out. I'd be shocked if Gordon MacPhail released a Ben Romick now.
It's because they respect whiskey people. It's like Alex said, this is the shit that keeps whiskey nerds up at night.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, who cares? Like, is it an OB or an IB? Like, it's an IB because it's under an independent bottling label. But yeah, the guy who owns both is the same one. So it's unusual. But I personally think it has to have come out of a business strategy for him to draw attention to one of the brands in a specific market. And then it just kind of became a thing.
It's a good theory. All right, it jives.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of independent ballers, and before we move on to the old one in this lineup, I did want to show a couple of cask photos that just happened to be somewhere along the lines in this tour that Evan and I were doing. So here we go. And I'm going to just start in an unusual spot, but I mentioned before that one of the things I love about the distillery is that it's really well hidden along the burn. Oh, that's not what I wanted to show. It was this. So the warehousing is here on the right-hand side of the creek, and it continues quite a ways down from this point, like probably a couple, like 200 to 300 meters this way. And at a certain point, you can cross over to the burn again. And this is the most recent site, and it's the one that goes the furthest back. And back there, there's warehousing, but that distillery we just looked through is right here. They built it in, and the whole site, I'm not kidding you, it's so well camouflaged. You would, unless you flew over it, you'd never be able to see the impact that they have or how far back it stretches. And rather than being an efficient kind of square or circle of real estate, it's essentially this linear distillery and complex that follows a creek and this tiny cut little valley, which is retains some of the aesthetic of the landscape. So in the warehouse there, you can see there's some Edradour, and what does that say? I can't even read the one up on the corner there. Cameron Bridge, I think, 1976. That's kind of cool. Clynelish 2008. This might have even been the one we bought. But then you get into some of these, you've got these old, like 1999 Burgundy or Bordeaux casks. That might even be the liquid in what we're about to sample in a minute. You never know. Because it was taken 4 years ago. 1979 Dallas Dew. Kurt, we were one when that was filled. 1982 Lynn Lithgow.
Wow.
Yeah, the Signatory guys had some crazy stuff in their warehouses. I don't think they have as much anywhere. Frankly, no one has as much, but one of the best releases any independent bottler other than Gordon MacPhail has done in the last decade was Signatory's 30th anniversary releases, which there was some insane whiskeys in there. We've got a couple of them coming back in this week. But closed distilleries, old vintages like 68 and 78 Bunnahabhains, Port Ellens, there was 83 Port Ellen. We did several tastings with those lineups and the whiskeys were all excellent. And it goes back to things I've said previously. And that's why I want to just take a quick minute to finish on the Signatory portion of this, which is the smallest portion of tonight's tasting. Historically, you can talk about independent bottlers and the different types of independent bottlers, and one stands out amongst all others, and that's Gordon MacPhail. They play in a league of their own. No one else has done and continues to do what they've been doing for 125 years. But when you get to the second tier of independent bottlers, we can argue who falls into that category: the guys who buy casks and hang on to them in some cases for decades until they're ready to be bottled, rather than just going hand to mouth like most independent bottlers do. But one of the best independent bottlers in that second category has got to be Signatory, because they would buy parcels of stock. They'd figure out what was good and what was ready to drink, what needed to be recast, what needed to be held on to longer, and that would be determined when it got released. And most independent bottlers don't work that way. It's all about turning over your inventory, keeping the business churning forward. And the Signatory guys, they ration things out over time. And as they're ready to bottle, they take them and they bottle them and they sell them. And the prices have increased over time as their quantities have gone down. But when you compare to what some other bonehead independent bottlers like Duncan Taylor have done, like their price increases have been rational, they've been reasonable, and almost always you can draw a line back to the quality of the product and say, yeah, the price went up, but it's still good. And I don't know about that other guy, but.
So what you're saying is we're not doing Duncan Taylor tasting anytime soon.
No, and I like Andrew Symington's a great dude. I don't want to say that Ewan Shan's not a great dude either, but he's not Andrew Symington. We'll just say that. We'll just say that.
Start
All right. Shall we to Bordeaux, right? We're going on to Bordeaux.
Mm-hmm.
Reluctantly.
Oh, come on. It smells like Dr. Pepper to me right off the bat, with like a pepper note.
It smells vinegary to me. It smells like you've got your steak and your wine in a glass. Honestly, it's got that meatiness. It's got the wine notes. But it's got,
tastes more like, or smells more like the balsamic vinegar.
That's that vinegary thing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But I actually like the nose. I'm joking there because everybody here knows I don't like wine casks very much, but I actually like the nose on this a lot. The palate may be a different story.
I think we came to a reluctant agreement when we did the tasting, because we did another tasting with that trio of Edradours either late last year or earlier this year. And I thought we all agreed this one was a lot better than we all thought it was going to be.
Damning it with faint praise, Andrew. Let's try it. It's because to me, this wine casks are all about the palate, and they're about that probably about 4 or 5 seconds after you swallow, and then everything goes weird.
Jim says he smells strawberries on this.
Well, maybe like a strawberry,
Chocolate.
a strawberry balsamic vinaigrette salad dressing on like spinach salad.
Oh yeah, that's actually great.
With some flower petals in it too.
Little floral, lots of orange, like orange zest. Like it's like on my tongue. It's like I bit into the orange to start peeling it, and you get like
The palate on that is interesting. It's like it's a juicy fruit bomb on the one hand, But then you've also got this musty old Dunnage oaky character creeping in. Those floral tones you talked about are there, Kurt. And then icing on the cake, Flintstone vitamins coming into the finish.
Flintstone vitamins, Ken's note on plasticine, Phil and Suzanne with thrills, and if you threw a little bit of mothballs on top of that, that's what the palette is there. It's weird.
It's not bad, but it is unusual. I would drink it. I would happily drink this if someone poured it for me, but it is a little on the wacky side.
It's really weird, but it's not bad weird. I'm with you. I can drink this. For a wine cask, I wouldn't have expected this at all.
Like this is what I would expect some kind of funky edible that my wife is into to taste like.
How about Chris's tasting note of pickled jubes?
Sour kids or whatever they're called, or like those sour sugary
Sour Patch Kids? No.
Yeah.
Not.
A little bit of drywall mud and like homemade Play-Doh, like when you just make flour dough kind of thing, salty flour dough kind of.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know what?
Yes.
It's different. It's interesting. It's not bad. So I guess, Kurt, I'm continuing to damn it with faint praise. It's an interesting whiskey to me. I would struggle to buy this, but I would happily drink it.
Yeah, that's where I am too.
Mm.
And that's a huge win on this, as far as I'm concerned, because I expected to hate this one before we started this tasting. So,
Do we know how long it was finished for? And I only ask because these days people are claiming to be finished, and it's like it's 4 years finished.
8 years
That's a long
finished
finish.
in Premier Grand Cru Bordeaux hogsheads.
8 years?
13 years in ex-bourbon, finished for 8 years. Yeah.
See, that's a long. That seems like a maturation period.
Well, you could get into the debate over finishing versus double maturation. And we won't even get into the old Jim McEwen acing, where it's like 2 weeks in, not even dumped fresh, whatever casks. We won't go down that road. Yeah. It's interesting. This is more along the lines of what Springbank used to do a lot of, which was almost half and half, or like very long-term finishing, and not a lot of companies do that.
Jeff, your comments are always enjoyable.
Mhm. Well,
impressive.
yeah, Jeff, in my defense, we don't get to sample these before we buy them. So no. And I think we do a reasonable job of, when we know something's not great, trying to delicately let people know that. And usually we'll find a way to just blow it out so that, yeah.
But we also recognize that we all have different palates and
For sure.
different needs. So
For
it
sure.
might
We
not
have
be
customers that used
great,
to
but
crave,
we still buy wine finished whiskeys, even though Kurt would rather we not.
yeah. Well, we had customers who used to crave like sherried sulfur bombs. So yeah.
And I say just take a bike ride through the mountains, enjoy the sulfur up there. Keep it out.
I think there's no two ways about it, though. People like me, or I think Andrew, and I'm not really quite sure where you sit, Harmony. I think you're kind of critical of them, but I think you're kind of okay with a lot of them too. The wine casking has gotten better and better, but you can't deny that even when it was at its worst, customers were coming in the door all the time looking for port casks, for Sauternes casks, whatever kind of whiskeys. There's not a ton of them on the market. So when they come in, we can't keep them in. There's a lot of people looking for that stuff. So I think my palate is a little bit of an outlier for not liking that, but I think the general populace is more than okay with that kind of flavor profile.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for it all.
Yes, Alex, to answer your question, I have had the wine cask catlets, and that's where I was saying things are getting better and better. Jim Swan has been the savior wine casks and whiskey, as far as I'm concerned. The STR process and more people being aware that rinsing is necessary before filling, I think has led to a lot less funk in wine casks, and they're getting better and better. But Cavalans are some of the best wine cask whiskeys on the market. I actually buy those.
Yeah. Alrighty, I don't know if I shared the link for that last one. I don't know that I did. Maybe I'll dig it up anyway. There's only one or two of those left if it was your jam, so be forewarned. And the reason I know that is it says low stock, so we'll share that in the chat. And then I'm going to pull up our last dram, the Ballechin, and then we're going to go, or Ballechin, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And then we will do our speed round. So here we go. And this also says low stock.
Yeah, we're getting low. I think we have fewer of the Bordeaux cask than of this one.
Okay. Words to the wise. So here we go. The Ballechin, straight from the cask. That's what the SFTC stands for. A lot of whiskey companies, especially independent bottlers, have names that are too long. So we seek abbreviations. Bottled at 58.1%, always in 500 mils. And this is young, but it reminds me a little bit of that whiskey sponge bottling, the Equilibrium, which was not quite as heavily peated, more sherried. But this is really reminding me of that.
Yeah, there's so much happening in here. There's your meat again.
Yeah, Sean got a great photo of this bottle too. I love the fact that you can see that the pearls around the neck. This is much more in that barbecue brisket direction, hickory. This is like going into Hayden Block when maybe their ventilation isn't working as well as it usually is.
Totally.
Oh man.
Oh.
That is both good peat and good sherry. That's got a really nice balance to it. A nice structure. There's some nice fruit in there. The sherry is subtle. It really allows those like smoky barbecue notes to come through. It's clearly not Isla peat. Like it's not going in that medicinal direction. It's not salty. This is I don't know, some undeclared Highland peat, because it's yeah, it's like Ardmore but good, by which I mean the peating. Just kidding. Ardmore makes the odd good whiskey. Evan,
We hear.
what's that?
We hear. We haven't seen one
Hey
yet.
guys, we have 2 Ardmore casks. Calm yourselves down.
Okay.
Those were
Actually,
good.
we did both love those ones too. We picked them.
They are really good.
So I said it can be good. Smoky, then savory. Someone was saying very tasty. Glad I picked up a bottle at the time. The best Ardmores are IBs. That goes without saying. Beam Suntory has absolutely no vision for that distillery. Yeah. Jam is appropriate. I'm assuming that relates to this one. Charred steak.
Oh, I get like big peppercorn notes on this.
Quite chewy. I mean, this has got to be a refill sherry cask. It's like the sherry's there, but it's not the star of the show. It's everything else is kind of the star of the show in this one. But yeah, I quite like it. Kurt, you've been rather silent.
I kind of like the nose.
You don't like the palate, eh?
I think maybe if this was disgorged, it was poured over somebody's toolbox and welly boots or something. palate's not working for me at all. The nose I quite like a lot. It does lean towards Isla without being there. You're right, Andrew. It's a little greasier somehow. Doesn't quite have that medicinal iodine sort of thing going on. But the palate on this one it's a little bit of a rocky ride for me.
You know what, Kurt? I'm going to blame this on you being slightly under the weather because
Okay.
I'm really loving it. I think there's malt, there's like a bit of sherry, there's some nice sweet fruits in there, heat, smoke. This one is actually ticking all the boxes for me.
I have to ask if I'm actually wrong then, because if Jeff says it reminds him a little of Lecheg, and I absolutely hate Lecheg, is that maybe just saying?
No,
And-
you're always wrong about Lecheg, Kurt. Always. You're always wrong.
And
That's
Jeff,
okay.
if by Lecheg, do you mean the 25-year-old society bottling that's actually a Tobermory with a bit of peat, but
No, but it's
classified
Lecheg
as
because at the
Lecheg?
time it was Lecheg.
because that's what they put on the barrels way back then?
And that was the name back in the day.
Well, the name is actually further back, but
Is
I
it?
think, I think in the late 90s, they were still putting Lecheg on some on the cask, because that was like, there was like, that's where the story gets muddy. There was a tradition of doing that back at that point in time. And I seem to remember that because of the Ballechin mallet tasting we did, where we had a 25-year-old Lecheg as well. That was not Lecheg, and it was because that was historically just how the casks were sent out from the distillery.
Well, if that's how it is, there's nothing wrong with them and they're beautiful and perfect.
Yeah, Jim, the price on this is $162.99, and keep in mind the website says low stock, so that means there's only one or two left. And I'm not sure if we can get any more of this one. Before we start our speed round, though, I may take a moment to just say we are getting some new whiskeys from Signatory and Edradour over the next 2 weeks. Post sale, we got to get rid of some of the old stuff to bring in the new stuff, as is the way things go. But if you bear with me for a second here, I can actually tell you what's coming in. There we go. What have we got coming? Kurt and Harmony, while I'm digging this up, do either of you guys have any little nuggets you want to share with everyone other than your tequila cask that's coming?
We're excited about that tequila cask. Like, I can't wait to get a bottle in my hand and start writing some tasting notes on it. And the label looks better than I imagined it would. And I know we sent samples, so we should have known when it was coming. But I'm excited. It should be here very, very soon. I don't know, notes and nuggets. Like, we have so many great tastings coming up. It's hard to keep up with them all. And then festivals, like if you can't make our festival next week, we have one in June. So plan accordingly and come fly out and join our festivals. So
we have a very opinionated crew here, and I know they're all well behaved and mild mannered and everything, but we definitely get some digs and barbs going on in the comments there. And I'm not kidding, this tasting is going to be a blast. That flagship Distillers Edition tasting. Andrew and I are going to be really doing that dance, walking along that line of not taking a piss out of Diageo every chance we get, and absolutely gushing over the distilleries that they own too. I think there's going to be a lot of truth come out in that tasting. So get drunk with us and come do that tasting, or get slightly less sober with us. We should encourage that kind of bad behavior, but definitely sign up for that tasting.
Kurt,
go home, get drunk with us.
That's right.
I need to clarify that slightly by saying I will be holding 0 punches back because it's Diageo, and I will be pleasantly surprised if I have to praise things that I'm not expecting to praise.
I'm having to be the middleman right now and having to reach out to the Diageo guys so we can have their cool stuff in the store. And I'm just like, get them away.
Also says the guy that keeps buying the bottles to sell in his store. Let's just keep reminding him.
Yeah. All right. And actually here, I've got a bottle of your Tromba. I've got a photo I think I can share. Let me see if this works. There we go.
I love it.
Ooh, I sent you a good one.
Here we go. This is the tequila they've been talking about. So this is what's coming. soon.
Yeah.
So stay tuned on that front. As I mentioned, I was digging into what's coming from Signatory and Edradour. I know we are getting some of that the next Edradour 21 Oloroso because we missed out on it last time. But we've got 96 Ben Rennes, 97 Dalyoo, and 1996 Glenrothes, which is not one that we normally go after, but I think this one looked promising. But what I'm really excited about, the prices have gone up, are the undisclosed Isla single malt, which I believe these are all 1990 and 1991. So I'll have to double check to see exactly which one we've got coming in, but it's sure to be gorgeous. The last one we had was great and great value, older Isla malt, which is not something we see a ton anymore. So those will be in starting Wednesday next week. We'll start rolling those out. All right. Speed round, guys. Let's see how that Edradour 10 at 40% has held up.
It's less soupy now.
It's more like, you know, if your grandma has like a jar of like just those soft, chewy caramels, you know, the ones that are individually wrapped in plastic wrappers, but she left it open for years. And you go in there and you get like, you know, there was caramel in there at one point in time, and you can get sort of traces of it, but it's really, really subtle.
It's like a clumsy version of dulce de leche with a little bit of flower petals to me.
I mean, it's better than the Singleton.
Well, it's better than is never a good way to start a tasting. Just saying.
It's not bad. It's just, to me, it's just really unexciting. It's better than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's still not something that I would want to.
It's kind of fallen apart. It's too, like, the ABV is too low to be open this long.
Yeah, and then if you compare it side by side to this 12, like, you just want to, he who will not be named, throw it away and just drink the 12.
Yeah, the 12 is definitely like a much better whiskey, worth well more than the difference in price.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I just realized I got to get a poll set up here. Harmony, do you want to keep us rolling with the keeping the speed round going here?
So I drank all of my Caledonia, but
no.
I know you all have opinions because I see them coming up on the chat. So to me, brighter, juicier, jammier, on the nose, especially on the palate from the 10-year. If anyone disagrees, go ahead. We're going to jump into the natural cask strength bourbon, which is, I regretted putting water in it. I just added a few drops in round one, but even as it sat here, it's became more tropical, really beautiful, really pretty.
Banana cream pie for me.
Oh yeah. I'm getting lots of lemon still.
It held up well.
Yeah.
It's, I would really love to see that whiskey with some age behind it.
There's a lot of cask influence there, though. There's a lot of vanilla. There's a lot of those like creamy kind of tones coming through. I think it would have to be a slightly deader cask to go too much longer. I think by about 16, you'd probably be overly woody.
Yeah, I don't think you could go 25, 30, but I think you could get to 21 with that.
Maybe.
Comments about the ex-bourbon. Some people say I find it, Jim says it reminds me a bit of Aaron whiskey. Jeff says that it's very bourbony and almost peanut on the nose.
I can agree with
bean casks.
Yeah. I get maybe a little bit more almond than peanut, but it's there, it's nutty. Signatory. So the IB of the OBs.
the boss.
Still standing up nicely.
Mhm. Yeah, that dollar for dollar, I mean, it seems kind of hard to beat. And it's packing a punch flavor wise, but good drinking strength.
Yeah.
It's great.
That
Yeah,
charred meat, that Maillard reaction, charred beef kind of thing going on there too.
I don't know why, but I'm craving like, it's not gingery, but I want ginger beef. Like I want noodles and ginger beef and all that goodness that comes with it.
You want to go for dim sum?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go.
Right now?
Yeah, I would go. I
Let me
haven't
talk
eaten
to-
dinner.
Let me talk to Jen. She loves dim sum.
Yeah. I'll have to scoot over there because I've been drinking 7 whiskeys now. I can't drive, but
Yeah, same here. Same here. Right.
so Edradour straight from the Cask Sherry 10.
Mhm.
Mm.
It's a little bit footy on the nose now. Very goopy, chewy sherry on the palate.
Mhm.
Still a little bit grippy, tannic, less chocolatey than I remember.
Did you say
I'm not-
shoey, Kurt?
Did I say
Like-
what? Sorry?
Do you say shoey like
Said chewy.
chewy? Oh,
I thought he said sheep.
That's what I thought he said. I was like, pardon? Like, yeah, Scottish dude, offside.
I don't know what those shoes are called that you wear for Oktoberfest in Bavaria. But I had to rent some and they're like made of kind of a suede and they're rented. So they have an aroma to them. I can sort of
Like
see that
bowling
aroma on the
shoes?
nose on this one.
Gross.
Is it like the bowling shoes at the alley or?
No, they're kind of more cloggy, but not made of wood.
Shoey is the new word. This is a shoey cherry
Yeah.
whiskey.
Kind of more cloggy, but not made of wood would be a great society bottle name.
Totally. I'm not digging this one.
Yeah.
The second time around, it's Jeff, I don't trust him. You're just typing stuff in. Yeah,
Buried and
kind of
chewy.
dumpy and doesn't quite seem to hold up as nicely as when we first went through. Mind you, it's not that long ago that we went through it, so maybe it's just not my favorite, but
Might just not be your favorite, Harmony. All right.
it can happen.
I think the polls are set up.
All right,
I
2
could
more,
say-
21 Bordeaux. Oh, I think this is pretty. It's very candy-like to me on the nose.
It's as though someone's aerosolized assorted fruits and Flintstone vitamins and
Yeah,
like sprayed them in your face.
yeah. Even those like chewy orange, like vitamin C vitamins. Like I know it's in line with your Flintstone vitamins without hitting all the cherry and other notes, but
Oh. It's still weird, but it's like that smell you just can't stop smelling. I'm really digging the taste on this. I just
Oh,
it
Andrew,
smells almost
the
sour.
comments are off
What's that?
the comments are off the chain right now.
Oh, they're hilarious. I
The
like
21
Chris's.
Bordeaux is my 8th favorite tonight. Legend has it was inspired by a goat hoof.
Was that related to the Whiskey 5 and the clog-like leather shoes from Bavaria?
Who knows?
Doesn't even matter at this point, does it? Amazing.
You know, as a host, we don't get to react to comments, and that hurts me sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't?
No,
I get to react to comments.
the F is it my broke laptop option?
I
that
just
I'm
clapped
going
for
with?
Jeff there.
Yeah, just hover over it.
I've been hovering all night, hovering on the
Are you on
seat, on the upgrade your Zoom version. Okay, well maybe I need to do that. Says like 4 people in a row. Okay.
Are you on an Apple device? Because
No.
that's from the cause.
No, I know how you feel about that, so I made sure I did not buy one.
No, it's,
Jeff
you
says,
don't have-
Jeff says they've censored Harmony because reasons.
All right,
All right.
last one, guys, before the the vote are peated, Edradour, Ballechin.
It's in some ways the simplest whiskey in tonight's lineup, but also the most immediately satisfying.
It's got a good nose. I'll give you that, except for that rubbery note. It's got a slight burnt rubber tone or warm kind of icicle inner tube or something. Aside from that note, the nose is pretty nice.
It kind of tastes like rubber too.
All right, I'm going to trigger the poll here. You'll all have a chance to vote now, unless you leave before you have a chance to vote. And as long as you're not sharing a feed, you get to vote. Otherwise, you have to share your vote. So you get to pick your two favorites. We'll let that play out for a few minutes here and see where it goes.
Sorry, Andrew, I have to trust my tasting notes. I'm being backed by people I trust and support here.
I love the comments.
Yeah. All the
Two
soup
tweets, hurry up.
comments.
All these soup comments remind me I'm late for Dr. Quinn medicine where we're women's murder she wrote marathons.
Oh,
I love that combo.
what about the Canadian version of that, which I believe is Murdoch Mysteries? Does anyone actually watch that?
And I remember watching it for the first time, like, oh, he's the handsome mystery guy to Dr. Quinn. But also, in my defense about I need to update my Zoom, I just go to Zoom every day. I don't have an app. I just go to Zoom.
Oh,
So
you
I
got
can't
to
comment.
download the Zoom app. So
Maybe I do.
if you're on the browser, that might be the issue.
Right? I have 4 different, I could go Chrome or Firefox or Microsoft Edge. Like,
Well,
I'm not tech savvy, so I'm open to suggestions.
We'll take this discussion offline and sort that out. All right, Kurt, since you are the fussiest of the three of us, why don't we start with you for your 2 favorite whiskeys tonight?
Okay, so if I'm being honest with you, there's not a whiskey here I wouldn't drink tonight. So when we're nitpicking, we are just being geeky here. I would drink any of these whiskeys.
It's kind of fun to make fun of you because you do have your whiskey tastes are almost as narrow as my beer tastes.
Andrew, we have an awful lot of the same whiskey taste, so be careful there, buddy.
It's true.
This is a tough one tonight. I kind of think the bourbon is showing better than it would normally just because it's such an outlier. I'm really, really digging it. I think it's just that it's way off the beaten path, but I'm really digging that. And I think I'm probably the Edradour SFTC Sherry would be my number 2. Probably those 2.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Harmony.
If I was drinking really fast, I would say the Edradour straight from the Cask Sherry 10, but as it's opened up, I haven't liked it as much. So my first favorite would be the bourbon, ex-bourbon, natural cask strength. I really liked it both times. And I enjoyed the Caledonia, actually. I thought it held up pretty nicely.
I love that we're all speaking from different playbooks tonight because and maybe it's just where I am in my day, my week, my month, my year, my life. But
Moon
I'm
cycle.
Signatory 10-year Edradour heavy sherry for my number 1 tonight because it's the whiskey I want tonight, which is something that tastes good and I don't have to think about it. And I'm just able to enjoy it. And I'm really torn for my second favorite between the Ballechin and the Edradour 21-year Bordeaux. But I'm actually going to give my second vote to the Edradour 21-year Bordeaux because it's just so weird that I want to explore it some more. So that's my second favorite tonight. Not probably what would be my favorites on a different night, but it's what my favorites are tonight. Quick recap of the votes. I'm going to share the results for everybody because all the votes that are possible have been cast. You should be able to see them now. The Ballechin, look at that. The SFTC Ballechin 12 wins first and second favorite whiskeys. It is the runaway. The 10-year Edradour SFT Sherry wins second favorite in round 1, and the Caledonia is third. And then in round 2, it is the heavy sherry Signatory, followed by the SFTC straight from the cask Sherry 10 that followed it up, came in third. So that's those are some interesting results. That's not what I expected might be the outcome tonight. And Kurt.
Yeah, so our next tasting is going to be Lecheg, a full line of Lecheg tasting, since we've all found that you support Lecheg tonight. Thank you for coming, everyone. This validates myself that Kurt and Andrew are often wrong. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Harmony, I just want to correct something here. I liked the Ballechin in this. I think the crowd has resoundingly spoken against Kurt and his dislike of the Ballechin in tonight's lineup.
We're still doing Lecheg tasting. We can call it something else, but we're going to do Lecheg.
The tasting should be called blue cheese smeared into the rubber hockey, the old rubber hockey room dressing room floors
of the Flames covered in tears.
Yeah,
but our graphics have to be all like Parisian, and it has to be like Le Space Dag for all the people that pronounce it wrong in the store. It's Le Dag tasting.
Le Dag.
Yeah.
This is fun.
It was a fun tasting.
I love you, buddy.
I'm thrilled that the 12-year Caledonia showed as well as it did, but also that the votes were sort of all over the place on that back end. So kind of cool to see. Any questions or anything before we wrap up tonight? Any final comments, Kurt, Harmony?
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you ever see low stock on a product and then lie about your favorite choice of the night so that no one buys it?
No, but
just me then.
Sometimes during the society tastings, I do try to pump up the ones I know are like, as long as they're still good, the ones that have not been selling as well, because a lot of times people buy not the best whiskeys in the lineup because they're buying based on someone else's reviews, the color, the description. And with the society whiskeys, it's weird. Like everybody wants the Kalilas and the sherried whiskeys, but they're not always the best whiskeys in the lineup. So
yeah,
so that's the only time I try to steer people. But partly that's also just to reduce the FOMO because yeah, sometimes.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I agree to the comments in the chat. Andrew, thank you for sharing the photos. I really I loved it. It made me smile, and I really enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I if I were an organized person with more time and not a puppy, I'd organize those photos so that I could sprinkle them out appropriately, because I've literally got tens of thousands of photos, but who knows when I'm going to have time to curate them. So someday that'll happen. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Kurt and Harmony for joining me tonight for tonight's tasting. I hope you enjoyed it. Jeff is saying you can't end without showing the dog. Oh.
Show that dog. Show
Walter.
that dog. Show that dog. Show that dog.
Is that a euphemism for something? Or?
Walter was sleeping, so he's not happy. He's just been woken up. But on behalf of myself, Kurt, Harmony, and Walter, I hope you all have a good night. We'll see you next time. And yeah, hopefully you'll join us for the tasting next Tuesday.
Yeah, have a good night, everyone. Good night, Walter. Good night, Andrew, Kurt, everybody.
Good night.